All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Vlad, and I am the product manager at Roland DGA for all of our digital print devices. Very happy you guys could join me this morning. I'm going to try and make this as more informative as possible since we have a small group. I just kind of wanted to, I took a temperature check early of who is a Roland user currently. Cutter. So we can talk about some Cutter things too. And then anybody looking to get into Roland that's not a Roland user already. Okay. So I'm going to make it a little Roland heavy, but for those folks that aren't Roland users already, I'll try to make it a little bit more universal. So VersaWorks. I talked to a lot of you guys yesterday, and it seems like maybe 20% of VersaWorks is actually being used. So I want to show you guys a couple of tips and tricks to make life easier. Even on the Cutter side, you can use these tricks on the Cutter side as well. How about for starting out with printer setup? Does anybody here have any questions on when you're supposed to use their different head heights on the printer? If you don't have questions, I can talk to you guys about it.
How about bypassing the ink setup and using just the cutter? The ink's older machine, the ink is, I'm not going to use the ink side of it on this machine because we're waiting for a new machine to show up.
Yeah.
And it's not responding to the computer, and it just keeps saying that we don't have ink in there. So
You probably put cleaning cartridges in would probably be the only thing that I can think of that would let you bypass that.
the cleaning cartridges.
Yeah. That'd probably be the only way. It thinks it has something in it and would probably be able to be used. Which one do you guys have again? Your older one was SG. The 30-inch?
54 inch.
54-inch VG.
X something.
XC 540? Okay. XC 540, so that's a lot of cartridges too. That's going to be an expensive plug-in for your...
Well, yeah, it's better than fixing all the print heads and all the other stuff. So we have a good machine coming, obviously, the new 54-inch printer cutter. But
Yeah, I do have a lot of folks that use them offline. I'll walk in their shops and they'll usually either have some like inexpensive third-party ink sitting in the slots, which might be less expensive than cleaning cartridges actually, so maybe just double check that out. Just as like slot holders. All right, so Roland is really known for our print and cut, and we have VersaWorks, which controls most of our printers. How many 1 to 2 year users do we have in here? 3 to 5? 5 or more? No, all right, so 5 or more back there, all right. So we have some new features. One of them, I showed some folks yesterday that seemed to really take off, was being able to add a contour cut line directly in our RIP software without having to go back into Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW or Flexi or one of those. Like maybe you set your cut line to the very edge of the graphic and a little light's peeking out. You didn't give yourself enough bleed on the image. With a couple of clicks now, we can actually go into that directly into VersaWorks and open up this tab that we call Job Assistant. So I'll open this Job Assistant. All I do on that is all I did was right-click onto the file, and it has to be a PDF file and have vectors in it. It doesn't have to have our cut line set already. If you notice on the left-hand side here, there's 3 different little tabs, and I can go, I want to draw a cutting line, or I want to change a cutting line at this point. And you can actually see vectors over here. If I select one of these vectors, it lights it up. So let's take one where it has a bleed, like this black one. And I'm going to take this line and say that if the vector was, sorry, I'm used to having a real mouse, guys. If the vector was, like we said, too far to the outside, we wanted to bring it in and give it a little bit of a choke, a little bit of a bleed to make sure that as we use our contour cutter comes down, it cuts to the inside and doesn't leave us any white to the outside. We can actually say, all right, well, give me another cutting line. What kind of cutting line? I have my choice between a regular cut or a perforated cut. So this would keep it where it's cut, but still holds it in place until you're ready to flick it out of the cut. And you could actually sell it as a sticker by itself, it's already all pre-cut. But if I wanted to take this, I'm going to say I'm going to do an outline. I'm going to cut just the exterior, not in the interior, and I want to offset this negatively. Let's go 3/300 of an inch, and this will now create a brand new cut line. When I say, all right, this is what I actually want to do, it'll change the job since it will actually give me a brand new job in the file now. So you guys can see it's populating down here. As I go into that file, if I go to look at the one that we changed, you can see there's a separate cut line now, all the way to the inside. These little dancing ants represent the cut line. I added a perp cut, just the inside, just to show you guys two different lines here. I was able to take that in and take it in 3/3 of an inch without having to go back into my software. I've seen that happen a lot where I'm printing labels and all of a sudden I see them peeking out just a little bit. My calibrations maybe weren't perfect and I'm peeking out a little bit on the left-hand side. And so being able to jump into VersaWorks and do this saves me a lot of time without having to go back. Any questions on that? Sorry, I'm not feeling a little well, so I'm a little sweaty today, guys. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys cut settings. So this is a big one for us. I'm going to pass a couple of blade holders around here, how I set up my cut blades. So a lot of folks, I go into their shop and they've got, 2/3 or 3/4 of the entire blade sticking out, and that's going to wear the blade down fast. It's going to wear your cut protection strip out fast. A few late folks over here. Any Roland users already here? General, got Roland users over here. All right, I'll try to make this. Huh?
We use
GrafTech, so you guys have a cutter. All right, so I'll talk a little bit more about our digital printers because we partner pretty well with GrafTech. But you guys pass this around. See how I have the blades that I can hardly feel the blade extension coming out. It's just enough to probably scratch my nail on the surface. Another thing we talk about when we talk about cut settings is, what am I trying to accomplish? If I'm just trying to accomplish a normal contour cut, just to get some stickers out like that, our standard 45-degree blades that come with the printer or cutter that you bring is called CEC 5032. It's our 45-degree blade. It's a great all-purpose blade. But if I'm going to be doing a lot of perf cutting, or I have a lot of intricate turns to make, I'll use a 60-degree blade. And this has a less blade face, so the blade doesn't have to turn as much to make those sharp corners. They wear out a little bit faster and they're expensive compared to a 45-degree blade, but they save you a lot of heartache. This is the only blade I really use, is the ZEC. On cut settings, you can do your cut settings either on the machine itself. A lot of people like to go over and dial it up. Old school, you can also set all of your cut settings directly in VersaWorks. So if you wanted to have a queue that's set up, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, I like to have things very organized. Say, this queue is specifically for wrap vinyl, this queue is specifically for matte vinyl, this queue is specifically for what other kind of vinyl, and so we can go through all of those setups and we can actually make our cut settings part of that and save it out. So let's do that real quick. Let's go to a queue setting. And for those Roland users, I don't know if you guys know, but if you hover your mouse over the little A, you can actually change the name of that queue. So this could become your cast vinyl queue if you wanted it to, or you could actually make it more specific and be like Mike's pain and butt file that you get repeated over and over and over again, and you finally dialed in the special sauce to be able to get what Mike wants. Now you want to be able to save that out. You can also go and say, I figured out exactly the right way to keep these settings the way that I want. So we can go to the setting and say, let's save this out. Let's add this as a new setting in here. We'll do this as Mike's special sauce and hit OK. okay. And Mike's special sauce, he needed this to be on high quality. He wanted to go, I had to do 16 passes. I had to change the halftone from dither to air diffusion. Does anybody know what that does? You change your dithering pattern from dither to air diffusion. Perfect, this applies to all digital print, not just Roland. Dithering patterns are preset patterns that say your rip system already has them pre-planned out, so they rip a lot faster. So okay, I'll use this dithering pattern. This is how I'm going to fire the dots to do this pattern, but it's already pre-planned. Air diffusion does a live mathematical analysis of the file and says, all right, we're going to give this file its specific special sauce, so to call it. We're going to say this one needs to be processed a little bit differently. And you notice if you can turn things over to air diffusion, especially on like RGB files, so as opposed to a PDF that's vector, you brought in a JPEG or something along those lines, air diffusion can really help you out with just pixelated looks, like especially if you bring in something that's a 12-inch image and you're like, I gotta blow it up to just 15, and you start to see it pixelate a little bit. Air diffusion will give you a little bit more to be able to expand that out without getting pixelated. Does that make sense? So sometimes I'll use air diffusion if it's a really large file, a lot of solid color. We don't want to have like we don't want to see odd dots from a dither pattern in a very solid color. I want it to be custom for that specific solid panel. If that makes sense. Interpolation, does anybody know what this is? So there's three different things. There's nearest neighbor, bilinear, and bicubic. It's another mathematical equation. This is the rip system looking at different pixels as they come in. So nearest neighbor says, I'm going to look just over to this pixel, and we're going to, all right, we're going to kind of bond together, and this pattern is going to make it so that we smooth out. The next one down is bilinear. This changes it to 4 surrounding pixels. It says I'm going to take the data from here, from this pixel, and this pixel, and this pixel, and I'm going to put it all together and do that mathematical equation I was talking about earlier, and say this is going to be the best way to lay down dots for this particular file. Direction. This has a huge, huge effect on your output quality. So bidirection means I'm laying down ink when the print carriage comes out this way, and then I'm laying down ink when it comes back this way. A lot of times when you end up doing bidirectional, if you think about a lawnmower, right? If I take a lawnmower and I'm pushing this way, and then I pull back, I'm going to leave 2 different patterns, right? Because I'm laying down ink cyan first this way, or magenta first this way, and then I'm laying down ink black first this way. So if I need something that's going to be really smooth, I'll change it to unidirection so that every single pass is the exact same laydown. That's going to cut your time double, though. It's going to make it so it takes twice as long to print, right? I'm only printing in one direction. So if I'm trying to print these decals that I had up on the screen, no need for unidirection, but if I was going to print up a large area, like I wanted to do a wall graphic and this whole thing right here was going to be this one color green, I'm going to slow the printer down because I'm trying to print paints. Any questions on that? And then color management. So regardless of what rip system you use, they all have different color management presets that are available. Color management presets. Any of my Roland users, do you guys know what the difference between when you choose Max Impact or Prepress US or our new Rich Color 3? Do you guys understand what's going on in the background there? So each of these has a specific set of rules that it tells the ink what to do. Prepress US is what was very common before. That was basically set on the press side. And then we started adding bigger gamuts for digital print. So I know we have a CMYK printer, but I actually designed an RGB because the RGB design space, say it was a Frisbee, RGB is this big, CMYK is this big. Now I know my printer over here is just a CMYK printer, but my RIP system can take all that RGB data and say, well, I can fill that into the gamut over here. Even though I'm printing only CMYK, I can put my different patterns, I can put my different dots down, and since I've given myself the biggest Frisbee to design with, I'm going to give myself the best chance of hitting those colors more true. So even if it's out of gamut, it's still going to pull it as close as possible into gamut. So what we've done with True Rich Color 3 or True Rich Color 2 is we've added orange, green as process colors into our CMYK, and now it's just like this big, massive design space. So you're not limited to CMYK design space. Make sure you design RGB. Your RIP's going to take care of taking RGB, converting to CMYK, all that kind of good stuff. You can get really into it. You can get really advanced and start doing your RGB. Which profile are you using? Are you using the wide gamut? If you notice, I'm not using standards. I'm not using like Adobe 1998. I'm using ours because they're actually bigger gamuts than the standard gamuts that are out there. Let's see what else we want to talk about. Oh, job variation. So how many users in here have had a customer? Let's see, let's go back to So how many customers have had somebody that's very color sensitive and then they have a file like this where there's just, 50, 60, 70 different colors all mixed in, and somebody says, everything looks great except for this magenta color, this pinkish color in here. It's not quite as rich or as dark as I really wanted it to be. Can you make that, my favorite word, can you make that pop a little more? Just give me a little more pop on that. Hold on, let me get my profile, my pop profile real quick. So we have a new feature that's called job variation. So we just talked about all those different inputs and outputs, right? I have max impact, I have True Rich Color 3, I have all these different settings. I can actually generate a job variation for this one job, and I can say, I'm having a color problem here, so I want to do a color management job comparison. I want to see what this looks like with True Rich Color 3, Prepress General, US, and let's throw all the ink in the world at it and go max impact and see how those 4 go out. Now I can hit OK. It just generated 4 different jobs for me instantly, and it's going to print those out if we go in. So now I would set this to the printer, and at the bottom of each one of each variation is going to say, all right, this is printed at this mode with this, and at the very end it's going to say this one was max impact, this one was pre-pressed, this one was True Rich Color 3, and now you can take that color management, I call it, and color management 101, I like to manage the customer's expectations and say, here, you choose. All right, and the other thing that I do is I go and I print up, here's my 3 top medias, and I print up my entire color chart on those 3 medias, right? So if I have a customer that comes in and says, hey, I want to have, I need fire engine red, and I want to do this on, a wrap material, and your favorite wrap material is IJ180C or Avery 1105 or whatever it happens to be. You print out a color chart like this one here. So this is basically the Roland color system library. We can print up a Pantone library, we print anything, but say you take your top medias, you print out this chart, and when the customer comes in and says, hey, I want that fire engine red. Well, what I see is red, you see is red, he sees is red, he sees is red. It's all perceptual. We all have different shaped eyes, we all are in different rooms, we all have different expectations of that. So one thing that you can say, instead of saying, well, I know I did PR43K red, Roland said that's the truest red that there is, right? Roland said that's the truest red. Well, I don't like it. I want it a little bit more like a brick color. He said fire engine. Which red do you want from Circle? I know on this material, on my printer, this color is what's going to come out. So whatever color red you hit here and you circle that, I'm able to do that So instead of managing color in here, manage the expectations of the customer first. I think that's color management 101, is getting the customer's expectations managed, rather than trying to do everything. Now when you start getting into packaging and prototypes and labels, and if you ever walk down the toothpaste aisle, it's one that, and you think about it as a printer, it's one of the most amazing aisles in the supermarket. Think about all the different cardboard, all the different substrates, all the different metallics, the foils, and how those guys have to hit color critical for like Crest and Colgate and all those have to be exact, right? And they're not printing on a dead white substrate. Sometimes they're printing on cardstock or silver, something along those lines. Then you start getting into color management. That's when we start doing customized profiles, things like that. But this is the biggest thing for me, is managing the customer's expectation. Saying, here's the colors that you can hit, you can choose your own color. On this material, it's going to look like this. On this material, it looks like this. On t-shirt material, it looks like this.
Excuse me, how do you get into that, the job variation, like the window?
The job variation window?
That?
Sure. So it's got to be a PDF file.
Okay.
So even if it's an EPS, just convert it to a PDF. There's not going to be any change in your in the printability of the file. But because of our old engine before we went to VersaWorks, Dual or 6, was a PostScript engine. It was the Adobe PostScript engine. So EPS files were the preferred file. This is actually a true native PDF processor. It's our Harlequin engine. So it does process PS files, PostScript files as well, but it's a native PDF processor. So some of the old school designers for Roland in here might be like, oh, I forgot to put my cut line on the very top, or I forgot to layer this. If you save as a PDF anymore, instead of it looking at every individual layer all broken down, imagine all those layers stacked up and kind of without flattening it even, it just looks through that PDF and it'll find that cut layer. It'll find your contour cut line. It doesn't have to be on the top, bottom. It doesn't really matter where you put it anymore. So that's one of the cool things. So if it's a PDF, you do that, and then all you have to do is left click on any of the files and generate job variation. And it's going to open up 3 different things. So we can do quality settings as well. So I could say, oh, I want to do this on generic vinyl 1. I want to do one on high quality, one standard, and one high speed. So instead of going in into your queue and doing 3 different jobs, you can do all 3 right here, hit go, and then you can, again, look at it yourself and be like, oh, that's bad, that's good, better, best. And then kind of present it to your customer. Good question. Any other questions on that? Cool. Wasn't there something specific you guys wanted me to talk about yesterday? Is there anything that anybody, so when I have a small group like this, usually I end up with like 200 or 300 people in these sometimes, and I'm very like regimented in what I'm doing. I would love to have like an open Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I'd like to answer questions that you actually have instead of me saying, here's what you should do.
What about magnet material? Can the Roland's cut magnet material, and if so, how would you set that up? So it's magnet sheets that go through a digital printer, comes back ready to, put the registration dots on it and go. How?
So are you wanting to move this over to your offline cutter, or you want to keep it in your Roland?
We want to keep the magnet in the Roland, if it's possible.
So I don't recommend printing magnets with Rolands.
Okay.
There are our print-only devices like our RF640 that are print-only, that do a much better job, and we have companies like FlexMag and a couple of the other Magna Magnetics. They create these little kits to make sure, because you have a lot of metal parts on your printers, so you don't, and that material is very thick and it's very rigid.
So it's already printed on the magnet
Yep.
substrate.
So not just over to the cutter, we
How do
go
we
from the
cut it?
printer to
Now
the
if you want to
cutter.
move it over, so I would gladly take that over and move it to a standalone cutter, and if you want me to tell you the settings that you would do,
That's kind of what we're looking at.
yeah, so a lot of people want to throw as much force at magnet material as possible and try to get through it. Bad idea.
Okay.
Pull your force back, use my 60, or any 60-degree blade instead of 45-degree blade, and instead of shoving 500 grams of force at it, pull it back to about 180 grams. And then, I don't know which cutter you guys have, but you should have an overlap or over dual cut function. So 180 grams, your first pass is going to score, your second pass is going to go through.
Okay.
so you want to make it so it goes to pass about 180. It depends on how thick the material is. This is something I did with, it was almost 20 mil
Ours is
Magnum.
16 point or something.
16. So this is probably a very good starting point for you guys. Now I pass around that little blade holder. Your blade extension is going to vary your pressure, right? A little bit more blade extension means a little less pressure that you need. A little less blade extension, a little more pressure you can give to it. But with thicker substrates, instead of trying to go, all right, this is a big thick substrate, max it out at 500 grams of force and slow the printer down, that's the other thing, is probably slow it down to about 20 centimeters, 15 centimeters a second.
Do you ever come and do trainings for just a cutter? Like, would you ever do that?
I'm starting to think about it. I get a lot of those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing online really that we have found that is, we're kind of more troubleshooting how to figure out how to work it.
Which cutter do you guys have?
24G.
GS24?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of videos on that.
With the new.
I actually have a video on cutting magnet material with the GS24. I'm giving you the advice that I use to cut magnetics 20 mil magnetic material. This is the secret sauce that I use to cut that on a GS24.
Where do we find your video?
Roland TV, I'm going to show you guys that at the very end.
Okay.
Brilliant.
So I know it's nice to be able to do live trainings, but I can't always do that, and YouTube sometimes gets very confusing, so we've created a station called Roland TV on our website. Let me see if I can get to that real quick. So RolandDGA.com. Then we have a little tab called Showcase. And then you see that play button over on the right corner for Roland TV. So instead of having to search through YouTube, it says GS2 or GS24 part 1, and then you can't find part 2, or you can only find part 2 and you can't find part 1. So we've put them all together in one area, and much easier to find. So like our VersaWorks, a lot of the stuff that we're going over today, I have all of these lined up from our latest updates. So if I have a new update that comes out, we put out a, hey, here's what's new with 16.13.1. Here's what's new with 6.12. Also, when we're not doing anything else, we go through and we say, hey, remember that class that we gave in regional supply and the guys had a couple of questions on magnet material or whatever? That's where we come in and we say, all right, we need to do a video and throw it up onto Roland TV. So if you guys are looking for further education on Roland products, Roland TV is the best place to go. It's the same place, same videos that we would house on YouTube, but very well organized.
I'll take some more time if no one else has a.
Yeah, feel
Cut
free.
Studio versus your VersaWorks.
Yeah.
Pros, cons, because right now we're using the Cut Studio because it was easiest to set up.
If you had a printer, then
That's the VersaWorks.
VersaWorks would be working with your GS24, because you can add your GS24 into a queue just like one of my other printers. So you notice, guys, I have 4 printers in my VersaWorks here. One of these could be a GS24. So if I did my print job here and I print those crop marks on the outside, instead of having to go through the whole thing and set up with my GS224, I just drag this down into the other queue and hit print. And the eye comes out, 1, 2, 3, 4, reads all those and goes.
You have to add the marks so it works.
You do. Do you need me to? I'll show you how to generate crop marks. So VersaWorks will generate Roland crop marks. So if you guys have an offline cutter like a Suma or GravTech, you need to use their plugin to generate their readable crop marks. The Roland's not going to read third-party crop marks. For you, it's just going to be,
It is what it is.
yep, you go over here to the mark section and say, give me crop marks. And you can do entire area, you can do each row, or you can do each data entry. Each data entry is, I would say, probably has like a 0.1% usage, and it's probably in that packaging and prototyping world, where cut quality would have to be as perfect as can be from one side to the other, because it's literally going to come out, read all 4 crop marks, cut 1 image, read 4 crop marks, cut 1 image, read 4 crop marks, cut 1 image. So packaging and prototype guys, they take one piece and they're like, all right, how does this look? And it's a $1,500, it's a prototype. They're only doing a one-off for this person, so it's a really high-end, or one piece. So that might be one time where we would use each individual data, but I like to use each individual row. It saves you from having to, we kind of went over it a little bit, a couple of the folks that walked in here yesterday. If I'm printing and I got a job that's 500 labels, and 500 labels equals 10 feet, I don't want to print 10 feet, wind back 10 feet, and then start cutting 10 feet. So you think about that. With a job like that, you would want to do pre-feed, so that's 10 feet of travel, then it comes out in pre-feeds. 10 feet back, we're at 20, there's been no printing or cutting done yet. We've already moved this material back and forth 20 feet. Now we're going to print forward 20 more feet, or 10 more feet. And now it's got to wind back and cut. So you're almost at 50 or 60 feet. So if we just did this row by row where we go, all right, I'm going to cut these first 2 rows. I'm going to print these first 2 rows, wind back and cut. And now I'm going to print the next 2 rows, wind back and cut. Next 2 rows, wind back and cut. You keep your registration. We do full rolls, 150-foot rolls. If you guys have ever been to a trade show and you see our little media rack, we do all that stuff in-house. We do it on purpose in-house. We don't outsource it, so we can say, yeah, everything that you see here was able to be done roll to roll, and we do it overnight unattended. So we can actually print, cut, start from this roll, and in the morning when we come in, it's ready to go into the other roll, ready for either lamination or post-production. Questions?
What about the blades for the cutter? I mean, do we need to have certain different blades for certain media?
These are the 2, and these are the part numbers that you should use too. This is your OEM blade. This is the one that comes with your machine. That's your 45. This is my favorite blade that Roland makes. This is a 60-degree blade. If I'm doing perf cutting, it's better for perf cutting because it's sharper. It has a more of a point to it, so it's more like a knife. It also has a smaller blade face, so if I'm doing very intricate things, like if you guys notice the diamonds on your seats, if they came to a really sharp point and I needed to make that turn real quick, I mean, you want to take off some nodes so that you're not actually creating a sharp pattern, but you have a lot of little intricate things, like on that file that I showed you guys earlier, the Athena file.
Would you recommend the 60 also for cut through laminate?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, it's literally my go-to blade. So you guys can see, I'll blow this up a little bit, but this, and I weeded these out in front of my friends over here who just purchased a VG yesterday. But you can see how sharp some of these points are. I probably could have taken the node down. You notice I gave myself that little bit of weed. So this is the red line that's going through here is my cut line. If I just set it to the stroke, it's going to come to the outside. If my printer is not exactly dialed in, perfectly print and cut, I'll end up with a little bit of white on this side or a little bit of white on this side, and we don't want that. So I always give myself a little bit of a bleed on the inside. But these are pretty sharp and intricate cuts. My 60-degree blade, I was able to just, and on a it's Oracal, it's a very flimsy calendared material that normally I wouldn't even go to weed or cut until I had laminated to give it some rigidity to it.
So what kind of media would you use for the 45 blade?
It's not the media itself, it's more the, what is the job that I'm doing?
Oh, like intricate? Or
Yeah, intricate, or is it just circles? Am I doing a bunch of circle labels where I'm just going to be doing jar lids? I don't need any fancy blade for that. Any blade will do it.
Okay.
Would you be going through a scenario of setting up a decal job into VersaWorks from print into just so that
You just want to see a job.
yeah, just which the process going from putting cut marks in.
So that would require going to Illustrator and that type of thing. I have videos I can show you on that, but I think probably afterwards, I'm more than happy to open up Illustrator and talk to everybody that's come to our booth. Most of you guys have already used a bottom printer or have one. So if you guys come over, I'll show you how to use the printer. I'll also do kind of special VersaWorks with you in Illustrator. I'll show you how to set up that line. We'll have a lot more pages. So you can push pause. And do you have any creative Illustrator use or Get flexing. Get flexing. Or you got flexing? So that makes it super simple. Either what you want, contour cut.
I can do that, it's just, I didn't have any problems going both.
Printing cut like in your prop mark set?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's take, come over to mostly look at the class, and I'll go from Illustrator to VersaWorks, print, crop marks, and then print after that.
Quick question again, when you were talking about cutting every other line or whatever instead of going 10 feet.
Yeah.
Can you show me that again?
Want me to set it up for you real quick?
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Sure. So it used to be more difficult, and you had to do a lot of math. We made it really easy by adding this crop to row, or I showed some other folks how to do it yesterday by just adding it as separate jobs. So if I wanted to do this one, and let's say we wanted to do, let's make this a ridiculous amount, so it fills up everything. So there's no way in heck that I'm going to end up with starting here, printing all of this, and then winding all that distance back. We're at 180 inches over here.
Well, that's what I do right now, so I'd love
Yeah.
to.
So
do it.
I'm going to show you how we'll do it better off instead. The most that I would probably want to do is come down to about 36 inches. So probably about these first 4 rows would probably be what I wanted to be able to get done. So let's take that down to, let's try 18 and see what it says. Let's fill up all the space. So let's say this is one job now. So we'll save that as one job, and I'm going to say, all right, let's print that one job, and instead of printing one of them, I'll print it 8 times.
Okay.
So now it's going to go and do those 4 and come back. And 6 months ago, before the update actually took place and we got this to be able to happen, you would have had to go in, fake the length of your media, remember that, paste it into the next section, and go, okay, I'm going to do a custom cut and say, all right, my page length is 36 inches. And then you have to break it up in your head, all right, every 36 inches, and now all we have to do is just say, let's do 3 rows of this, and we'll do that job 8 times.
Does that waste very much?
No.
Doing it that way?
No. If we were to say, if I were to load this job 8 times and say, hey, all right, here's 8 different PDFs, then I'm going to get 40 millimeters of space between each print. When I'm doing it like this, and I'm saying, give me the same job, yeah, the space is cut in half. It's like, you can actually shrink it down to, I think, 10.
So it's crop marks every time?
What's that?
Is it reprint the crop marks?
Well, this would be for a job that doesn't have crop marks, that we wanted to do with crop marks. Are you guys doing print, pull it out,
Nope. So it's
lamp? So this works perfect for you. Okay. For you, I'll show you what we do on the other side of it.
There's a way to shrink that space in between each job, though.
Yeah.
Where's that? Yeah. Sorry.
No, this is exactly what I hope for. It's all boring in the beginning, where I'm trying to tell you what I think you need to know, but when you guys ask me questions, it's way better for everybody. It's better for everybody in the room, to be honest. I'm going to do first what he asked for. Let's do this one, and let's get this down to. Let's go back to. Let's do 72 copies. Let's make it 70. All right, so you've got your 70 copies, but you don't want to print them all at the same time, and you need to have crop marks. What we're going to do is we're going to do a crop mark each row. So now you can see it turned it into several different jobs. Now, we may not have needed each one of these to be its own row. So, and the way to trick this is in Illustrator, which we talked about earlier with somebody else that was in here, is instead of having just this one image be a file, gang up 3 vertically. And that's now your one file. So when you bring that into VersaWorks, it'll show you 3 of these up in there. So now if I do crop by row, it thinks that 3 of these very close together is one row. So you need crop marks around those 3 rows instead of just one. So they, in your design software, stack it up 2 or 3 high so that you don't have a crop mark on each individual line like that. And it'll think however high you go. So if it's 5-inch stickers, and take it all the way down until it's like however many copies it takes. And then you want to take that to 1 copy. So now as you do that to 1 copy, each one of those, it'll print 20, come back, print 20.
So when I've added more than one design, like the 3 you were talking about, I haven't done it a bunch, but the contour lines seem to just disappear when I bring it into VersaWorks. Not normal?
No, it's very abnormal.
Okay.
No, VersaWorks will only do whatever you different designs in
Yeah, I
yours?
did have, I was like printing samples of the
Yeah.
different ones, that I had, each had their own cut line, but when I brought it into VersaWorks, all the cut lines were gone. And it just printed it instead of,
We get that on our graph that I told our vendors actually to reset it.
like,
We'll power cycle it, it'll never work.
But when you bring it into VersaWorks, does the little A box show up?
the A-box.
Yeah, so like when you have a cut line or any specialty item in VersaWorks, and I haven't forgot about minimizing the page space, we'll get to it.
Okay,
If you notice this little A that's right here,
yeah,
it tells you have a cut contour. If you bring that into VersaWorks and it doesn't show up, it says you did something wrong in your design. That's what VersaWorks is saying. I'm not saying that. But VersaWorks is saying, I don't know what you did. I don't see your cut line. Go back to your design software and see if you, and then make sure you're setting these PDFs too.
so
If
I'm
you have-
using EPS.
If you're using EPS, then it could be just layered wrong. I have solved a lot of problems just saying, throw it back into Illustrator and save it as a PDF, see what happens. And then the cut line pops up, or the white layer pops up, or the gloss layer pops up, whatever the situation. Page space. In your little cut controls area here, or I'm sorry, printer controls area here, if you go to custom settings, it's a standard of 40 is the page space, but you can take that all the way down to 0 if you want to, or 10. But right now, yeah, it's at 40 millimeters is like the, and the reason for that is because you usually need to leave a tail end if you're going to pull it off and put it back in, so that the sensor will pick it up. So that's usually a 40 millimeter space, but if you're doing multiple jobs, there's no reason to leave yourself that extra space.
That's a game changer, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Can that go towards the start of a job also? Like getting rid of that 40 whatever millimeter space at the start
No,
of
but
the job?
put a piece of tape over your sensor can. You have that little front sensor over there, just a little piece of masking tape over the top of it. And you can take that all the way back to your cutter protection strip, just before your cutter protection strip. Should we go? Yeah, you go in my shop or my little laboratory with all my printers. I have all my sensors just kind of. I have one that's perfectly normal, like a customer would have, just so I can, if I bring customers in, it's like, what's going on with your printer? I'm like, I don't need all the safe bills that everybody else has. I know some of the things to avoid. So. Any other questions, you guys?
What's the best way to tell when you need to change your blade?
You'll start seeing either skips. So with cutters, and this goes for our printers and cutters, so we're just talking about the cutter portion or our standalone cutters. 3 things that you have to change: blade holder, blade, and cutter protection strip. Usually, you can feel the cutter protection strip. If you feel any kind of jagged divots in your cutter protection strip, that little tiny blade that we have, it's going to jump over every single one of those little divots, leaving a stitch. So a part where you thought there would be a cut, there's not going to be a cut, or it will be not cut as well. And when you're going to weed, you'll be like, oh, why do I have that little tab there? And if you run your finger across the cutter protection strip, there's probably a little bump there. You probably had your blade out too far, or used a little too much force, and you dug into the cutter protection strip. I'm sure that our folks that are heavy cutter users have damaged a cutter protection strip or 2 in their time. So that's the cutter protection strip. With blade, if you start noticing you're getting a little bit of chatter in your cuts as well, or you're having to increase force to get the same quality, you're getting towards the end of your blade life. Also, I know that they're really tiny, but if you can use your phone to kind of magnify it, you can actually see the blade, and a lot of times you can see if it's perfectly sharp or if there's little chips in it.
Got a question. Maybe you already explained this, and I think I got here when you were talking about it, but about the contour cut and perf cut. The way we set it up is like, I didn't know that the best blade for perf cut is a 60 degree.
Yeah.
So what we do, we use the 45, and Illustrator, we set up the contour cut and then the perf cap on top of it. So when we send, the job to the printer to cut, it will do the contour cut, and then we'll
Yep.
come back and do the perf cut in the same, same.
Yep.
So is that a good way
Mhm.
to do it? I noticed I missed the settings for the perf cut, and I would like to, I don't know.
Whatever your contour cut settings are,
Yeah, for the perf cut.
yeah, so whatever your contour cut settings are, whenever I'm gonna do a perf cut, I throw 100 more grams of force. If I use 80 grams of force to cut my vinyl contour, I'll start at 180 grams for perf cut. That's not an exact science, but it's a very good point to gauge. I don't think you'll probably end up having to go more than 10 grams up or 10 grams down after you add 100 grams of force to it. There's no perfect settings for how, it depends on the job that you're doing for how you're gonna set up how long your tabs are gonna be. So your half cut force and your perforation length, that depends. Like, if I set up a weird if I wanted to do a perf cut on this guy and I wanted to do it and follow the contour, obviously if I did 1/2 inch longs, there's gonna be times where I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna run out and I'm not gonna make it to the 1/2 inch, so it's gonna skip, and now you can give me a perf cut there. So maybe on this one I would have it, very close together, like almost, yeah, so my perf cut would be like, like it would almost be like tacking all the way across. But if I'm doing a circle, a whole bunch of circles like that, and my circle has this, it's 5 inches around, I'll do my perf cut where it's, my perf cut length, my perf length is maybe 2.5. So I'll give myself only 4 cuts on that entire circle. But it's a circle, it's smooth, or a square, and you can do an exact science to it. You can say, all right, I know the circle is 5 inches around, so if I do 2.5, I'll want myself one at the top, I want myself one at the bottom, that's it.
Okay.
Or if I do 1.25, then I'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4. Gotcha.
Thank you.
So we print on a 12 by 18 piece of vinyl on our Canon printer, and then we stick that into our cutter, but it seems like we're not able to go right to the edge like you are here. We have to have quite a bit of edge when we put the marks on, and we're wasting quite a bit.
Our marks are pretty close when we generate our crop marks for our printers. I don't know what Canon crop marks look like or how much page space they require.
They're yours. We
They're the
create
Cut
the
Studio.
file, and we, using Cut Studio, we can then
So
send
you're going
it
into
to
Cut
our
Studio doing do you guys use the 3 or 4 dots there?
Yeah.
In Cut Studio, yeah, you're pretty much stuck with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, you're gonna need it. It needs that space to be able to say, all right, I know where I'm at on the page, and now that I've read all these, I know where the vectors are, and there's a certain amount of space that needs to be had for that. With VersaWorks, it's a little more powerful. We're able to bring that in a little bit tighter, and we have an extra little mark that goes to the outside. That is your base point, where you guys are missing out with Cut Studio. Any other questions? Back corner.
Variables.
Variable data? Let's see if I have a variable data file I can access real quick. All right, I think I have a variable data file I can use. What's your question about it?
Illustrator, or VersaWorks can only let you do 144 numbers, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay. And we're making parking passes. On that, do I have to create more and more files, or can I use the original one and just change the variable when I've reached my 144?
Which version of VersaWorks are you using?
The brand new one.
Brand new one? Are you sure it's set to 144 still?
I'm not sure.
I think that we increased it. I think we almost, I need to double check that. Come by my booth when we're all done. I'll look up the last update. But I want to say that we increased the number of Excel lines that we can have. I want to say it's 500 or something like that now. I think that we've increased it dramatically.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Cool. All right, I think there's another class getting ready to start. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to come up. I'll sit around here for a couple more minutes.